Thank you all for joining us today and being here in person. And for those of you joining us virtually, thank you for taking the time to make the effort to have this discussion. My name is Neal Patel of Patel Partners, and on behalf of the Joseph Rainey Center for Public Policy, I would like to tell you thank you to the Arizona State University. And also, I will be serving as your moderator as we discuss the stateside climate solutions in the United States. The Rainey Center is a public policy research organization and leadership community. It's founded on the values of equality, freedom, and a more perfect union. Named for Congressman Joseph Rainey, the first born enslaved and first Black African American to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. Rainey Center fosters a dialogue on solutions to America's challenges while amplifying the voices of women, minorities, and mavericks in public policymaking. So, the Rainey Center and Arizona State have developed a working partnership to advance public policy dialogues like these, and most importantly, on consequential stages like COP28. Today, I'm joined by two leading state elected officials from the U.S. The first is Mr. Daniel Linville, or Linville. Daniel Linville is a lifelong West Virginian and represents the 22nd District of the West Virginia House of Delegates. He serves as chairman of the House Committee on Technology and Infrastructure, and additionally, he serves on the Finance, Banking, Insurance, and Rules Committees. He's worked on infrastructure and broadband internet expansion in the West Virginia legislature. He's been featured by the Pew Charitable Trust, Forbes, Americans for Prosperity, and the Government Executive Media Group. Delegate Linville has been a featured panelist and thought leader on regulatory reform at numerous conferences of colleagues across the nation. Our second panelist is joining us is Representative Mesha Mainor. State Representative Mainor was elected to the Georgia House of Representatives in 2020. She represents the heart of Atlanta, including Midtown, Georgia Tech, the Atlanta University Center. Representative Mainor is an Atlanta native and sixth-generation Georgian. During her first session, Representative Mainor authored bipartisan legislation to create the Fulton Technology and Energy Authority, the first public agency in the nation to focus on fourth industrial revolution workforce. Her historic legislation makes Fulton County a leader in technology and renewable energy career readiness while also improving the state's energy infrastructure. Before we begin, I'd like for State Representative Linville, can you tell us briefly about the Rainey Center's LAMP initiative?
Yeah, so LAMP stands for the Leadership Alliance for a More Perfect Union, and I've been involved with it basically since its inception in 2019. And unlike many other groups that sort of are around the country for state legislators, this group focuses on bringing folks in and resources that we need in order to meet the challenges that our states are facing. And so, LAMP is a leadership organization. Rather than giving us model policy to consider passing, like many groups have a tendency to do, it takes input from members and gives us that leadership and professional development so that we can be more effective legislators. And I'll give you a few examples of that. During COVID, we had the chairman of the FCC appear and take questions from us as we were trying to respond to some of those things. LAMP members have been authors and sponsors of billions of dollars of tax reductions across our states, from West Virginia to North Carolina and Florida and several other areas. And so it's an incredible organization that has impacted legislation meaningfully all across the country.
Great, thank you. So, serving as a backdrop, you find yourselves in Dubai, both of you. You've come quite a long way. COP28, off the top, you've been here for a couple of days. What are your thoughts? Mr. Linville, you can start, and then Ms. Maynard, please
Sure.
fill in.
Sure. So I mean, first, Dubai has been incredible. It's always incredible to see the world, right, and to see how other places sort of do what they do. And so, Dubai being smack in the middle of the Middle East and halfway around the world, it's quite a jaunt to get here. But to see so many leaders and trillions of dollars of capital, all represented all in the same area here for COP28 and all that's going on with United Nations, given the difficulties that we have all across the globe right now, from geopolitical instability and all those things, has been absolutely incredible. But the dialogues that have been had, the professionalism between people, and the ability to understand one another has been great. And of course, the host country of Dubai has just been incredible. It's a beautiful skyline that has been built, as I understand it, over the last just 50 years. So it's remarkable to see.
You just touched up on something we'll talk about in terms of timeline. Ms. Maynard, what are your thoughts?
Well, first, let me just say thank you to Arizona State University for hosting this event today and the LAMP and Rainey Institute as well. And thank you, Neal, for the
Sure.
introduction. And thank you, audience, for being here today. I think that what has been remarkable about being in Dubai really are the thought leaders that are here. People are here from across the world exchanging ideas. And in this short period of time that we've been here, we have learned about cutting edge technologies. We were just with someone last night talking about electric speedboat
Oh, yeah,
and what
absolutely.
that means for communities like Georgia Tech. So you mentioned earlier that I represent Georgia Tech. I represent the most college campuses within the state of Georgia. So when you're talking about research and technology, this is where you come to get the answers. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the conference.
Great, thank you. So there's an old adage in American politics that both of you just kind of touched up on, where all politics is local. And as we tie in that sentiment with what we're seeing today, not just from Washington down, but what challenges do you see locally for transitioning your workforce of your districts to this new idea of tech jobs, specifically clean tech jobs, and what's going on there, whether it's, retraining or messaging or what's available. Um, how do you see yourself tying that into your district, into your constituencies?
You want to take it first?
I'll go first.
Sure.
So I created something that you mentioned earlier, the Fulton Technology and Energy Authority, and that is exactly what um, the legislation does. It creates workforce opportunities, one for the underserved, and two for those that would traditionally not be exposed to fourth industrial revolution workforce. In my district in particular, we have the highest energy burden within the metro Atlanta area. And so public transportation is moving to electric transportation. And so electric public transportation needs a workforce to maintain that electric public transportation. And right now, there are not avenues within the state to really focus on increasing human capital in those capacities. And so we do have the ability through local legislation, through state legislation, to create opportunities in the workforce. And that's exactly what FTIA was created to do. What are some challenges with that? Challenges are there's never a challenge if you are creative enough. And so, but I will say that with messaging, that can be a challenge, especially when politics are involved, right? Because one party may think that there's one way to do it, another party another. And so opportunities like this, we can hopefully come across some bipartisan agreements for the sake of the country.
Absolutely. So, Neal, in West Virginia, I'll tell you, we've certainly got our fair share of challenges. I come from coal country, right? And I was very disappointed, just a few days ago to hear the United States climate czar claim that he would want to militantly shut down all coal-fired power plants, and I think that's very short-sighted. I think Elon Musk even stated a few months ago that if there was a button he could push to immediately turn off all fossil fuels, he would not do it because it would cause a catastrophe. Um, the reality in West Virginia is that we're people that are willing to work hard. And we're people that it's not we when people say that we're friends of coal, we are, but it's not just simply because that we want to go underground and dig up a black rock. It's because we want the jobs that are capable of putting food on the table for our families and providing a better life for our next generation. So when you look at a job that's able to provide more than $100,000 a year lifestyle for a family on one income, for someone right out of high school, that's hard to replace, right? And so, but in West Virginia, we're putting in place policies which are allowing not just that to thrive, but all forms of energy to thrive. So, as we've removed the ban on nuclear energy, as we've begun to allow for power purchase agreements and things of that nature, as we've brought in additional collaborations, and just in my district, there's an electric vehicle charging manufacturer. We've got Nucor Steel coming in with the most high-tech, greenest, cleanest steel in the world, which is almost entirely recycled. using an electric arc furnace in order to produce that, and bringing in $100,000 a year jobs, and 900 of them. We certainly have a challenge with workforce development, and in West Virginia, we've risen to that challenge. So what we've essentially done is we've put in place something that was known as Senate Bill 1, which is the West Virginia Invests program. And in that program, the state will pick up the last dollar for any community and technical college training for any person in the state. So as long as they fill out their federal application for federal student aid, they immediately, whatever the last dollars in are, we will pay for it. But on top of that, we're partnering, and our community and technical colleges are partnering with um, various job creators and saying, what programs do you need, and how can we put this together and put a program together that the moment that someone graduates with an associate's degree or a certificate, that they're ready to go to work for you and meet that need. So, with the most loyal manufacturing workforce in the country, we're trying to meet that demand and be welcoming of further investment, and we're beginning to see it.
So that leads me to the next question of how do you expect or how do you anticipate balance of renewable energy to fossil fuels, especially in our energy supply, change in the coming decades? We're starting to be at the very, very front end on the tip of it, but especially in your two states, how are y'all seeing that change in real time in real life?
So, Georgia, we have made a commitment to nuclear energy, and we do have we're a coastline state, so there are other
Sure.
opportunities with us being on the coastline. You know, my philosophy when you're talking about the balance of sustainability or renewable energy versus the fossil fuel energy is God created this earth with all of these resources. And so if we use all of the resources that God has given us, there is not a struggle. I think the struggle really is more of a partisan struggle. Sometimes people feel like we can only use fossil fuels or we can only use renewable energy. For me, and particularly in my district, as Daniel said earlier, people need jobs so they can put food on the table, and also people need dependable energy sources. And so this is not a competition of energy sources. This is how do we sensibly use the assets that God has given us to use.
Yeah. Well, and Neil, I think in West Virginia, we've taken an absolutely all of the above energy approach. And so when it comes to that, we've got an abundance of natural gas, coal. But again, we just repealed the ban on nuclear energy. There's a number of entities which are looking to bring in small modular nuclear reactors to the state of West Virginia. Um, uh, we're working with solar, wind. There's a huge amount of wind turbines in our eastern panhandle. And the reality is, we want to be the energy hub that for the 21st century for the East Coast of the United States that we have been for the 19th and 20th century. And so we're embracing that. What I would say, in regards to, how what that ultimately looks like, you have to understand that it's easy when you get together with, a tremendous amount of capital in the room and very wealthy individuals, the price of electricity doesn't make up that great a percentage of their monthly budget. But when you talk about that there are billions of people in the world that make less than $2 a day, when you even talk about people in the United States that have, an average salary that's a little lower than some others, energy costs are particularly high for them. And that we've seen them rising. So, what that mix is going to look like is West Virginia is going to continue to work to be as clean as we possibly can. We're going to embrace carbon sequestration and those sorts of things. We've got a hydrogen hub coming in just a few miles outside of my district. Um, and so we're taking all the above energy approach, and I'll give you a concrete example of that. A coal-fired power plant was about to be shut down in the state of West Virginia, and it's now transitioning to hydrogen. Believe it or not, in every single job, this was just announced last month, every single job that was associated with that power plant is continuing. And so that's a huge public policy win. It's the Pleasance Power Station, and so that also keeps gigawatts of electricity available for
Sure.
the PJM grid. And the final thing that I'll note, we as we work on energy policy, we have to do so responsibly and reliably, because nearly 1 year ago today, it was actually Christmas Eve, the PJM grid actually asked people to turn off their Christmas trees right? Because they were worried about blackouts. And so the reality is you have to have that dependable, reliable base load, and all of the above energy approach provides for that. And so I think that's where we're going to go, and we're going to continue to be good stewards of the environment. West Virginians are mountaineers. We're probably out in the environment more than most. In that everything that we do, we like to go hunting and fishing and
Right.
mountain climbing and
Right.
skiing, and that's part of our culture. That's ingrained in our culture. So we're going to embrace that.
And I was just about to ask both of you, and you already answered the question. I said, look, are your districts hospitable to renewable energy infrastructure? And you touched up Georgia, the coastline state. It doesn't always come to mind immediately. You touched up on hydrogen hubs, wind turbines. That's not when people think of when they think of energy in West Virginia. So I guess my next question is, there are still some strong voices coming out of the Republican Party about renewables. What about the messaging needs to change from your perspective in order to highlight something we need to not only have a seat at the table, but actively engage on?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing that we have to begin talking about are the jobs that are really associated with it, right? And there has to be an understanding that both sides have a reasonable argument to make. So on the one hand, an underground coal mine that I was in just a month ago has 65 jobs every shift, right? A 2 gigawatt solar project has, upon full completion, so once the construction is over, 5 jobs permanently. So you can see where the difficulty there is. However, in West Virginia, we're looking to not just install these items, but to build them. We want to manufacture them, and so those are the sorts of jobs which allow for that domestic manufacturing that provide for our national security
Sure.
and provide those livings for people. And so I think in West Virginia we're embracing many of these things because the hydrogen hub has on its face, before you look at any of the downstream economic benefit,
Sure.
500 permanent jobs. Nucor Steel, 900 permanent jobs, all with very high standards of living, in a way that is beneficial to the country. So that's I think where you're going to see West Virginia and Middle America. And the final thing I would say is that there has to be a discussion. There has to be a discussion nationally surrounding replacing jobs and understanding where you're making an economic detriment, right? So all of Appalachia, Eastern Kentucky, Southern Pennsylvania, the oil fields, some of those areas. If the policies are going to harm jobs there, the question that has to be asked nationally and internationally is what are you doing to benefit those areas as well? Because if you throw a wrench in their economic engine, you can never blame them for doing everything in their power to stop you.
Okay.
I would say that Representative Linville hit the nail on the head. It really is a conversation about job creation more than anything. And Goldman Sachs did a study that said in 10 years, 300 million jobs are going to be lost to artificial intelligence.
Right.
So not only are jobs going to be lost to artificial intelligence, we are entering into this new artificial intelligence industry.
Right.
And that is where clean energy, climate change also comes into play. And so the Fulton Technology and Energy Authority, the things that they are doing really leads right into job creation for that. The other thing why this is so important, when you think about the Rainy Institute and LAMP and Arizona State University, is they tote policy in the middle, and so it's a great think tank opportunity for both sides to come together on these issues. Right now, I actually met Representative Linville through this institute as a former Democrat. And so there are opportunities for um, nonprofits and the such to really go in and help with the messaging for the Republicans that aren't quite clear on the benefits of these policies, if you will.
Right. And so that being the case, how do you believe, especially change effectuating, um, from our aspect in terms of government, normally you will see ideas germinate in the state. Someone takes on the federal level and says, hey, we like what happened in the state. How do we bring it up? So on the state and local levels, how do you feel that can change federal policy for energy, whether across the board in any sense of it? And if you could give examples potentially of things that you're doing in your state or things that you're doing in your own districts that have worked or that you can cite, very interested to hear and all ears as to how we could probably replicate it. As in Washington, there's nothing new under the sun.
I think it, and I don't want to harp on FTIA, but
Yeah,
FTIA is a great example. Um, when you are in the state house in Georgia, there are 180 House representatives. There are 36 senators, and so to get something passed, you need it to pass through 236 people. And so you can create local legislation. And so FTIA is the first, not only in the nation, but it also is the first, of course, in Georgia. So now FTIA is a model for other local counties, other local municipalities to do the same thing.
got it.
And I think that what we can do legislatively is create local legislation to
Sure.
override what's happening at the federal level, bypass what's happening at the state, and start locally. I mean, that's where politics really starts anyway, is locally, and we
Right.
need to just take it back home.
Sure. So I think perhaps the greatest thing that the federal government could do that we've attempted to do in West Virginia has been regulatory reform. So we understand that capital flows to where it's easiest to do business. And a lot of folks think that's just tax policy, and certainly that's a big piece of it. But the reality is that years ago, decades past, a person would have a capstone project to their career, right? There
Right.
was a great big building, something like that.
Right.
Anymore, it's the fact that they got a permit. And so the permitting process taking 20 years to work on energy is untenable, right? We used to be able to build things in our country, and in fact, Dubai is an incredible example. In 50 years, this skyline has
Right.
produced now the largest building in the world, and so many buildings that are like that. Millions of people, being in the city all the time. It's absolutely incredible. So in West Virginia, we put in place a 60-day regulatory shot clock on Division of Highways approvals for access to our rights of way. We've taken primacy from the federal government with the FCC and instead placed that on our Public Service Commission in relation to attachments to our utility poles. And regulatory certainty is that which will once again allow us to build things in this country. And I would
Sure.
call on our Congress to do that because innovation is where and how you're going to be able to reduce energy prices. Innovation is where and how you're going to be able to meet the needs
Sure.
of our next century. And in fact, I'll tell you, one of your Public Utilities Commission commissioners I saw about 6 months ago, and he gave a speech. And then a question following that speech was, how on earth are we going to be able to shut down some of these existing, generation facilities and electrify the vehicle fleet,
Sure.
right? And his response was the following: you can either shut down fossil fuel generated electricity generation, or you can electrify the vehicle fleet. But you cannot have both.
That was Commissioner Tim Eccles.
Yes, it sure was.
That's um, you know, energy companies have given a new commitment to renewable energy resources. We've seen that. We've seen countries do that. I mean, we're here at COP28. How do you see these playing out in your states or your constituencies and your districts? How you both have large presence of companies, Southern Company in Georgia, Nucor, as you mentioned earlier, large presence in the state. They're investing heavily. So how do you see that playing out in your own backyards and in your own constituencies?
I think we go back to locals again. So, Georgia, we have the Georgia Territorial Act, which pretty much says that the Southern Company or the Georgia Powers do have a lot of control. But FTIA, within the statute, within the legislation, it says that FTIA can sell energy. And so that is a big move for the people in my district. So, my district, I mentioned earlier that it has the highest energy burden in the metro area. And so, when you're thinking about on one side, people that cannot afford energy, but on the second side to that, also have the most Fortune 500 companies and a lot of tech hubs. Google is in my district,
Sure.
Salesforce is in my district. These tech companies are huge energy consumers, and so, if we can provide them clean energy sources
Sure.
at a reduced rate
Sure.
within urban communities, because there isn't mining as such in the metro area, more direct energy, then we're bringing down the prices for the consumers and we are putting the product closer to the hands of the consumer, if you
Okay,
will.
the end user. Gotcha.
Certainly. So locally, we've seen a tremendous amount of investment in green technology, but also in existing technology. In West Virginia, we're very proud to say that we mined the coal that built the steel,
Sure.
that built the tanks that won the war. Right, over and over and over again. We mined the coal that built the steel, that built the interstate highway system and many of the skyscrapers that you see all across the country. But now we're repatriating some of that steel production. So you've got Nucor Steel, and part of their portfolio that they had to have was a certain amount of renewable energy generation.
Sure.
In addition to that, we have Berkshire Hathaway that just invested with Precision Cast Parts, and they are putting out a solar project to power an entire new titanium manufacturing facility for the aerospace industry. So we're proud of that. We're beginning to see that come in. Um, in addition to that, I'll tell you there's some interesting solutions that we're looking at here. So West Virginia University is patenting an incredible technology that is taking what was a liability, which was coal mine reclamation liabilities, where you had issues with certainly a lot of environmental concerns and what you do with where the waste impoundments are and those sorts of things. It turns out that they're very rich in rare earth elements.
Sure.
And so we're working on refining rare earth elements there, which both is a national security benefit and a renewable benefit, as it relates to the liabilities that otherwise were there for coal mine reclamation. But in addition to that, it's no longer a liability. It's going to be viewed as an asset. And so once again, we can take what was a challenge, and just like with carbon capture, just like with some of the hydrogen opportunities that we've had with our coal fired power plants, and take this technology, take this innovation, and solve some of the problems that we faced.
Sure. So I'm gonna switch it up a little bit now. So on a global focus, global population is growing, which has in turn led to fossil fuel demand to increase. What are ways that policymakers can work to mitigate the environmental impacts, whether it's through new laws and regulations or alternative incorporation of resources of power and energy? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that when you're talking about the global footprint, not only are people moving and traveling, we are from the US. This is my first time in Dubai. People are moving, and each country must have its own commitment to do the right thing. We can't really be in a space where we're putting more responsibility on some countries and not on others. So I think the first thing we need to do is um, categorize or in a hierarchy how much carbon footprint, if you will, each country is putting out there, and we need to put um, not necessarily caps, but we need to make sure that each country is categorically and hierarchically
Sure.
um, decreasing the
Okay.
amount of carbon that they are putting into the country versus I think what's happening right now, a lot of people are putting a lot of um, responsibility on the US,
Sure.
but the US is not the highest producer of carbon. And so we need to make sure that other countries are also being held to the same standards that America is.
Okay.
I think it's free markets, free and fair trade equals the best outcome, right? In addition to that, so when you look at the rising global population, I think that's a good thing. Population collapse is a much greater concern for me than rising global population. But what I would say is that as long as the trade is free and fair, and that you'll see exports of innovation more so than you'd believe. Now, obviously, the other thing that's incredibly important here is that we regain some geopolitical stability. Unfortunately, I will tell you that as Russia invaded Ukraine, um, the state of West Virginia made a lot of money. 1.6 or so additional billion dollars in coal mine exports as Europe wanted to keep their lights on. And coal was exported, and thermal coal was trading at over $400 a ton on the spot price in the European market shortly after that happened. So what does that ultimately take? That takes regulatory reform. all across not just the United States, but all across the world. And let me be a little bit more specific. Regulation has a tendency to be well intended, but sometimes just to solidify one entity's position in the market. And what that leads to is a lack of innovation and disruption in the market. And there's some really incredible, innovative ideas that are going on. I'll give you an example in West Virginia. Um, there's a company called Clean Vision. They're taking plastics that are in our oceans, and they just announced a few months ago their largest operation in the United States. I believe their first actually. Um, and basically they're taking tons and tons of plastic and they're breaking it down into oil and then ultimately into hydrogen. And so they're solving a problem. They're taking something again that was a liability for companies, for waste companies, and then turning that into an asset. So we're excited to see that. But that was brought about by an advanced manufacturing bill, an advanced recycling bill that we passed with a little bit of forethought and made it explicitly allowable for them to use the technologies that they have. And I give a lot of credit to our Speaker of the House, Roger Hanshaw, who's a PhD organic chemist who helped to push that bill
Sure.
to allow for that. So again, but for that bill, they may have never been able to do so in West Virginia. And so we've got to be responsive as lawmakers to make sure that we're allowing for that innovation.
Got it. Well, we've now come to the freestyle portion of the program. So I'm going to ask you both, what's the one thing, one ask that you're making policy-wise for your communities in the energy realm?
Mine is definitely workforce development. People need jobs, and if you're looking at the future of the world, those jobs must be in technology. Those jobs must be in forward-thinking energy.
Sure.
And Fulton Technology and Energy Authority is right on the top of the spear of that.
Right, right.
Um, when you are thinking about, um, again, I want to go back to this discussion we had yesterday with someone. When you're talking about the dynamics of boating, right, and the wing shape of the boat, there's a certain way you have to sand the boat. Those are jobs that are part of this new workforce that we're not currently training people on. We also need to realize that everyone is not going to go to a 4-year college. But if we commit ourselves to technical and vocational trade in this space, then each person that has a job is now a taxpayer.
Sure.
And when you have increased taxpayers, that's more appropriations that states have to do other things to help individuals. So I think that if we stay focused on workforce development, if we stay focused on creating jobs for people, if we stay focused on realizing the fact that everyone is not going to college, what can we do with the workforce that's not going to college? That is our biggest, that's the greatest thing that we can do right now is focus on those individuals because the ones that are going to college, they already have a lot of things figured out already.
So from my end, the biggest first my biggest ask here in Dubai is for folks that are representing companies that are looking to invest to realize that the safest nation in the world to invest in is the United States of America, and the best place in the United States of America to invest is the state of West Virginia. So let me begin there.
On message.
Let me begin there.
Let me add that too.
The
To do
second best
business
place
is
may be
Georgia.
Georgia. But finally, no. The biggest thing that we can do, if you want to innovate, if you want to allow for dreamers to be able to shake up the markets, to be able to provide for a future that is what we hope that it will be, you have to have reliable, affordable energy, and you have to have regulatory reform. Those are the two things. The currency, I mean, you began to mention artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, some of those items. The reality is that the currency moving forward and what will position a state or a nation in the best possible place is going to be energy, right? Reliable and low cost energy. And if you have ample, reliable, low cost energy, you are positioned well for the 21st century. But the only way that you get there regardless of the technology that you're looking at. The only way that you get there is you must have regulatory reform. And in the United States of America, the all with good intentions, all with good intentions. But if you can't get through the Endangered Species Act, the National Historic Preservation Act, or the National Environmental Policy Act in a span of 10 years, we're going to be behind the 8 ball, and that's why we can't build anything in this country anymore. And that's why projects cost 3 times as much as they should. And unfortunately, that's why most projects that were even contemplated by the Inflation Reduction Act have yet to happen. And I'll end with this one because it's incredibly important. Senator Manchin was just on the floor of the United States Senate. I believe it was yesterday or the day before. There's a little bit of a time difference here, so I want
Right.
to make sure that I get this right. But he pointed out that in the Inflation Reduction Act, that there were billions of dollars for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Whether that was advisable or it wasn't, because when Henry Ford built the Model T, there wasn't a national action to build gas stations. But either way, not the first charger has been built in the United States as a result of that program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, according to Senator Manchin on the floor of the United States Senate. And the simple reality behind that is that we're getting in our own way. And if we can get the government out of the way, you'd be surprised what Americans can do and what the people of the entire world can do. There's a lot of smart people ready to do a lot of great things. And uh, regulation certainly has a purpose. It's not enough to say, don't be a jerk in the law, right? But it's perhaps gone too far when you spend more money trying to comply with regulation than you do actually building something.
If I could also just add to what he just said, I think it's also important to remember that energy and technology are really synonymous. We can't do forward thinking energy projects
Sure.
unless the technology is also there, which is where our institutions come into play. But the other thing I do want to point out, in Georgia, we do have Rivian and many other electric vehicle manufacturers,
Right.
which includes some electric vehicle manufacturing chargers.
That wasn't the Nevi plan.
So we're at time. I would like to thank both of you on behalf of the Rainey Center for being very active on your issue areas and also for providing a voice. And also, Arizona State, thank you for
Thank you.
having us and hosting us here today and giving us this platform. And with that, I will conclude today's presentation and also the panel. So thank you all very much for attending. And for those of you at home,
Thank you all very much.
thank you.